This is for both Derecks. What's the right way to spell Dereck?
Dereck.
Derrick. It's my way.
That's nasty.
Bro. I'm not going to say what I really want to say, so we're just going to leave it at that, bro.
I think you should still say that.
Nah, it's all good.
You sure?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You good.
He's trying to have me lose money, dog.
Thank you. You guys have a good one.
Y'all have a blessed day, man.
On this episode of Inside the Mavs, I got to get you ready for Game 6 between the Mavericks and the Thunder, and I brought a special guest with me who, of course, is asking all the hard-hitting questions. Tim Cato of The Athletic joining me here on Inside the Mavs to get you ready for Game 6. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode. And you can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video. And you can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports as well. Tim Cato of The Athletic covering the Dallas Mavericks joining me here on this episode to get ready for game number 6 between the Mavericks and the Thunder. Tim, what's going on?
Nothing much. What's the right way to spell Kevin?
Kevin. That's the right way, the only way.
I feel like I've seen some. I guess if you put an O in there, it's a Kavan.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, different name. Maybe an E. Maybe 2 E's.
I have seen Keven. I have seen that before.
Not trustworthy.
That's wrong. Nope,
yeah,
it's not.
Like that.
Definitely not. By the way, real quick, what inspired that question? You just wanted to bring some joy and some laughter to the conversation. You felt like it was too serious and too stuffy in the room at that particular point?
The Mavs just don't do dual player post-game interviews like that very often. It was, I've actually, so there are some teams that prefer to do it that way. Oklahoma City, in fact, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, and Shai typically always do their post-game pressers together. But the Mavericks almost never do that. I actually asked once, and they think it takes away from the interview, and so. But when it does happen, what you can get every once in a while is like an amusing little back and forth. So, I was just trying to figure out what's the way I could get those two going at each other, a little bit. And the Dereck one was pretty obvious as a good option there.
Yeah, definitely one of the more fun moments of this series because, Tim, you've been traveling with this series throughout the course. Really all playoffs long, obviously, but this has been a very physical series. A team in Dallas has been playing terrific defense. In fact, allowing just 110 points per 100 possessions so far in the series. And you look at what we are now at with the Mavericks up 3-2. From your view, how did we get to this point where we're looking at Game 6 now as a closeout opportunity for the Mavericks on Saturday night?
Dallas adjusted after Game 1. They, I had concerns, especially without Maxey coming into this series. I've talked about that a little bit on my podcast. I thought that they might struggle keeping the centers at the rim. And to me, that's the biggest change in this series, or the biggest thing, that has defined the series, is that Dallas is just doing that anyway. Oklahoma City is this 5-out team. Dallas has struggled against 5-out teams in the past, even when their defense was improving. They still lost a couple times to the Indiana Pacers. That was a really tough matchup for them, and it really put a lot of focus and attention onto the centers who, against like Miles Turner and Kristaps Porzingis, who, Boston was also in that stretch. They weren't rotating out to those players quick enough, and just weren't as capable doing that. And in Game 2, Dallas just said, our centers are still going to stay at the rim. They're going to play, sometimes it's literally almost a one-man zone defense. And Dallas has just been able to do that. And Oklahoma City, despite being percentage-wise the best three-point shooting team in the NBA during the regular season, has not been able to punish that. And so it's that defense that has carried Dallas. And so Game 4 was a huge missed opportunity because it's always possible Oklahoma City comes out on Saturday and just has a three-point variance game. They hit a bunch of them. I think Dallas has done a good job limiting their looks for the most part, but I thought Game 5 we saw a few more open threes that Oklahoma City couldn't convert, and it's always possible that could just happen in a game, and all of a sudden you're going to Game 7. But so in that sense, that's where it's a real true missed opportunity. That said, I think Dallas is the better team. I think they win this series, and I think they can most certainly do it on Saturday if they come out with the right approach and get a little bit of offense going.
Yeah, a couple of things, because Oklahoma City is only shooting 33% from three so far in this series. And part of that, you've mentioned, they've got some really good looks. And the old adage in this league is it's a make or miss league. And when you're making them, these teams can be extremely hard to beat. But obviously, when they're not making them, it's hard to win games. And I'm glad you brought up the point of how you feel about these two teams and where they are, because better than anyone, there's always comes a point in a series where and feel like who the better team is in a particular series. And I feel like the Mavericks, for me, got me to that point of me thinking that they were the better team when they were up by double digits in Game 4. We say, Kevin, now they went on to lose that game because, they couldn't make free throws down the stretch. But I felt like if this team played to their capabilities offensively and defensively, the way that they had gotten after the Thunder, especially on the defensive end, that I felt like this version of the Mavericks was the better team in this series. When did you kind of get to that point where you felt like the Mavericks were the better team in this series, if they played to their capabilities that they should be able to win this series?
Yeah, I think Game 4 is probably a good shout. I don't know. I maybe even in Game 3 for me, when they replicated what they were doing in Game 2, and we know what playoff series are. It's between every single game, there's adjustments. Minnesota just completely revamped their defensive approach to Jokic to get a win in Game 6. That Oklahoma City couldn't come out in Game 3 and tweak things and figure out a change and certainly when it carried over to Game 4. Yeah, I thought pretty clearly that was a mark of who was the superior team in the series.
Yeah, and now we've gotten to a point where the Mavericks are up 3-2. And, you wrote a terrific piece, as far as your latest one detailing Luka Doncic, because one of the things that has been really discussed throughout the playoffs is, number one, the three-point shooting has been great for him, but obviously the most important storyline for him is that, he's dealing with significant injury. But for you, based off of what happened in Game 5, he was able to play extremely well, had the 31-point triple-double. But what struck me was at the end of the game and some of the comments that he made about getting back to the love of the game and playing with that kind of joy. In fact, he talked about this in terms of the officiating. I want to play this clip here because I want folks to kind of listen and understand where he was coming from in a portion of this to kind of give people an idea of what he was talking about.
You said several times, focus on playing basketball. Wasn't a lot of conversation with the referees tonight. Was that something intentional, and how do you think that helps you if it was intentional?
Yeah, intentional. Like I said, just focus on basketball. I talked to them normal, without complaining and nothing. I think it was the whole game, nothing. So I just go out there, hoop, have fun, man. Have fun with the old Luka. So smile on my face.
The old Luka with a smile on his face, among other comments that he made about focusing on basketball. What did you make of those comments and the fact that at this point in this series that he felt the need to discuss this the way that he did?
I mean, you watched him in Game 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the worst games in terms of, this constant topic of conversation we have had for many years about Luka, that he can get mentally distracted by everything else around him, whether it's, mostly it's referees, sometimes it's fans. He said after the game, and I thought this was a good point, he likes when fans, he likes talking smack to fans. He enjoys, it gets him going when they chant Luka sucks. But there's times where that gets in his head, fans get in his head in a negative way, in a way that does not help him on the court. I thought also in game 4, he was hunting fouls. So it wasn't just the referees and maybe frustrations with the referees, but he was also hunting fouls. He was trying to get fouls drawn on Lu Dort, especially after Lu picked up a couple quick ones. And all of this stuff just leads to a player that is, as someone who wants to see him at his best, I know that game 4 was not that. He was moving fine in game 4 and game 5. I don't think this injury is affecting at this point, more than 2 weeks after he suffered it. I don't think this injury is affecting his ability to play offense. It doesn't seem to be affecting his ability to play defense, not over the past few games, that's for sure. Yes, he's definitely in pain, and there's definitely, extra hours of treatment to be able to get onto the court. But I think he's fine, at this point. And I was watching him in game 4, and it's like, this is not something you can just explain away with the knee injury. It's his entire approach to the game. It just was off. And so kudos to him, after suffering a really disappointing defeat in game 4, whoever got through to him, or more likely, Luka just realizing. I don't think that this isn't something that like people are telling him this. Like he's well aware of it. It's ultimately on him to act on it. And kudos to him for acting on it and in game 5 and just start, from the moment the game started, you could tell it was going to be a different sort of night for Luka, and Dallas needs that.
It is funny you brought that up, because I asked Jason Kidd about this during media availability on Friday, because I wanted to know, has someone discussed this with him for him to be able to have a little bit different perspective, for him to implement it? And I thought his answer was interesting, and it not only had to do with Luka in terms of how he felt himself, but honestly what the team and what he discussed with the team as far as that was concerned. Here it is.
Luka had said that he concentrated more, obviously eliminating the conversations, extended conversations with the officials, and getting back to the love of the game. Was that a specific conversation that you may have had with him, or is that something that he just kind of decided that on his own he needed to do to be able to really help this team from that area and standpoint?
Yeah, I think he had that conversation with himself. I had the conversation with the team before we went out on the floor, just understanding, the atmosphere, being on the road. The calls will not go against you, so let's not complain about the calls. And then I needed, I thought for our bench to be involved. The energy of our bench is sometimes doesn't get the credit, but they needed to be involved in that game, and I thought they did a really good job. And then a lot of times, sometimes guys can, be irritated that they're coming out, but we needed some positive energy when you come out, that the next guy that, you're passing the baton can carry the load. And I thought the guys did a really good job with that.
How does that land with you, hearing Kidd discuss that in that fashion there?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the way that Kidd has approached coaching for, since he was hired, that he has a hands-off approach. And I know, that has frustrated fans, and some of the comments, that kind of stem from his approach have definitely frustrated fans when things aren't going well. But he understands that he cannot alone change, the behavioral patterns of his stars. He is preaching patience and with Luka, and he understands that Luka is the guy who has to come to these realizations to some extent himself. And so I think that makes sense. Clearly it worked. I definitely criticized Jason Kidd last season. I thought he didn't, make the most of the sum of the parts that was on that roster, but we know that was a flawed roster. When I was criticizing, any criticism I've had of him, beyond that is he getting through to Luka? If he was hired to be someone who can interact with Luka and bring out the best in him, is he doing that job? And I think from the start of the season, when Dallas really upped the tempo, there's an example. I think this has been Luka's best defensive season. There's an example. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there was a bit of a relapse or a reversion from Luka over the, first few first two games of the series and game 4, especially like we talked about. I do think that I could see a scenario. This is just speculation, but I could see a scenario where he did get hurt and he is, not making shots, and that frustration just, snowballs into, even past perhaps the impact and the effect of the injury itself. But, whatever this approach is, that's probably the most important part of his job, is that he's getting the most out of Luka, and that he's, continuing carrying Luka into a future where he's a better, more rounded, more focused, more impactful player. And I think that game 5 was a good example of that. And I expect to see it again in game 6.
More with Tim Cato of The Athletic here on Inside the Mavs. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, Tim Cato of The Athletic joining me here as we get you ready for game 6 between the Mavericks and the Thunder, with the Mavericks leading the series 3-2 with a second opportunity to close out a series at home. And we were detailing, obviously, for Luka, the 31-point triple-double that he had, and getting back to, for him, the smile on his face and playing with the joy and love for the game. And there's been a lot of joy that we've seen from this team, particularly, no matter how the series ends, two names really, but the one that sticks out the most for me, PJ Washington, has played extremely well in this series. He's had 3 20-point games so far in this series. His defense and athleticism has been well chronicled and detailed. But, Tim, I keep thinking back to the trade that they made and what they gave up to get him, and then a lot of criticism from a lot of folks who cover the team and also fans outside of it thinking, hey, man, y'all might have given up too much for a player that really hasn't filled out his potential in Charlotte. But for Nico Harrison, seeing what he did in him, he's become a major part in this series. And I say that because I think going into game 6, he's going to play another major factor in this game for them to be able to have an opportunity to close out Oklahoma City Thunder. What have you thought of PJ Washington and what he's been able to do in this series now going into game 6?
Yeah, I mean, he's been sensational. This is nearly the best case scenario Dallas could have imagined when they traded for him. Maybe not the ice cold, shooting stretch he had, kind of in March, but really truly, like, this is one of those really high end role players. Starters can be role players, and he is playing a role, and he has shown the ability to play beyond the role. I think as much as his role in games 2 and 3, was to take those open threes that the defense was giving him. But he's finding other ways to contribute. The defense has been there since day one. And so I think that this is, it's so encouraging, for Dallas going into the future. I remember I was talking to a Mavs person before game 5, and, he was expressing, just the disappointment if Dallas were to lose the series because of that game 4 in the fourth quarter collapse. But, I was like, yes, that would be disappointing if this series ended in a loss, still would be, it's still a couple games to play, a game to play. Even though I expect them to close this out, but going forward, whenever the season does end, it's positive. The team is excited. They feel confident that they have a core to take into the future, to take into the coming years. And, that's, a huge part of that is looking at PJ and what he's been able to do in the postseason.
And the other two guys who we heard at the beginning of the show, Derrick Jones Jr. and Dereck Lively, the 20-year-old rookie who has obviously been dealing with unimaginable tragedy with the loss of his mother, but has played terrific in this series. And Derrick Jones Jr., 17 points and then 19 points to back that up, going a perfect 6 of 6 in the first half in Game 5. I'm just amazed at what they've been able to get out of these guys, whether it was Dante Exel throughout the course of the season and now Derrick Jones Jr., who was reinserted into the lineup after they had lost 5 of 6 and really helped turn that defense around, obviously with the acquisition of Daniel Gafford as well. I thought Derrick Jones Jr. has been terrific in this series. How does he factor for you going into Game 6, given the skill set that he brings and what he's been able to do so far in this series?
Yeah, Derrick Jones has been, just so important to this team. I wrote about him earlier this week on The Athletic, talked to his agent, talked to Jason Kidd about how he ended up coming here. And he was weighing, he turned down a player option for Chicago, which was about $1.5 million more than the minimum. And, he and his agent turned that down knowing that the realistic landscape that summer might only be the minimum, but they needed to get him to a spot where he could, shine and thrive. And, so he was weighing it between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks, and he chose Dallas. He saw more of an opportunity, and he wasn't promised anything. There's no conversation about him starting, when he talked to Jason Kidd before making his final decision. That's not what anybody had in mind for, literally the last player signed to the roster, a minimum guy. This was not in the plans, but he got here and he showed what he could do. And, he is just so important to this defense. His point of attack stuff on Shai has been sensational, just really, really, really impressive stuff from him. It's when Shai gets his points, it's almost always because he gets Derrick Jones switched off of him. And then the offense, the ability to, play him. So Oklahoma City made that lineup change. They Josh Giddey and they put in Isaiah Joe. And so Dallas's reaction in Game 5 was to attack Isaiah Joe pretty much every single possession down the court. Every single time they're pulling his man into, to screen for Luka or Kyrie. And that man was Derrick Jones Jr. And so when Oklahoma City just trapped those pick and rolls, knowing that they didn't want to concede that Isaiah Joe switch, what Luka or Kyrie would do was drop it to him like he was a rolling big man. And he has played like that before. He has played like that in Miami, and he had played like that in Chicago. And that was one of the reasons that he chose not to return to Chicago, even with more money, is because he did feel like he needed to showcase his ability as a wing. And he's done that in Dallas. But to have this like little side trick where you can just all of a sudden become, the rolling big man and do it effectively. One time he finished, just straight up in the air, probably about 6 feet. Chet jumped up and Jones jumped higher and put a little floater in. I think he found Lively or Gafford for a dunk once. So that was just really impressive. And then, Lively is the other guy you mentioned. Game 5 might have been his best defensive game he's ever played.
Yes.
He was so good. He is just so good defensively. And, he's 20. How good is he going to be in 2 or 3 years? That's my question.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point because, you think about the mature. We lauded his maturity and the way that he's handled himself, just being a rookie and then everything else that he's been dealing with outside of basketball. But in Game 5, his abilities to play in space, it felt like he was kind of playing kind of a one-man zone where he would be able to show, he would still be able to drop. He was able to use his length to be able to cover different parts, of the paint. And, the Thunder haven't been great in terms of shooting at the rim. They're only shooting 61% at the rim. And part of that is the really good defensive paint presence between Daniel Gafford and Dereck Lively. But yeah, Lively has kind of turned himself into this one-man kind of, all right, boys and girls, listen to me when I say this, okay? it's a Rudy Gobert-esque type of player that is starting to develop here. I don't want you to go out here saying that Kevin said that Dereck Lively was out here looking like Rudy Gobert, but I'm saying those are some of the kind of characteristics that a Gobert possesses, his ability to cover different areas of space, be able to help out on weak side. I think Dereck Lively has a chance to be that kind of a defender, especially with the athleticism that he plays with. I may be getting a little too far ahead, but that's the way I feel like based off of what he's been playing the way. So
Kevin Gray believes that Dereck Lively II could hold Nikola Jokic to 3 points. That's what I'm hearing.
Is that what you heard? Is that what you heard?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I
That's
guess
absolutely what I heard. That's what you said. And I want everybody on Twitter to tweet this out and just kind of get some feelers on what people think of that.
Well, I'm gonna go the whole Luka. What's that? The knock on the head, whatever that is that they do in Slovenia too. Maybe we'll see that in the Western Conference Finals. But ultimately, I feel like that's the kind of talent that we're dealing with, is someone who is understanding the game. He's a sponge. You see him in practice. You see him in games. He wants to constantly learn, and I feel like he has a chance to be able to be a terrific defensive player, and he's showing that so far, in this series. And last thing before we kind of get to how we feel like Game 6 is going to go, because I can't not have this conversation, not touch on Kyrie, because a lot's been made about Kyrie, the scoring or lack thereof at times, but the defense that he has played and his ability to be, somewhat of a maestro in terms of orchestrating all of this in terms of the offense, that he's running for the Mavericks. I really think he's played really well, even with not having one of those big scoring games, because we haven't seen Luka and Kyrie have that big signature game together yet in the postseason, and I feel like it's coming at some point. But how have you assessed what Kyrie has done so far in this series?
Yeah, he's been awesome, or at least a step below awesome. When you consider everything, I think he's averaging like 9 assists in the postseason, or the series, and that defense has been just sensational. Look, it's two things. Yes, he's being schemed out of games to an extent, because pretty much every pick and roll he runs is a double from Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is bothering him too. Like we can also say that, it's not just like Kyrie's making the right basketball play. He has at times kind of tried to look for his own number, and he's not creating in the way that he, we're used to seeing him. Big, long, athletic wings who can move their feet with him, is the one type of defender who bothers him a little bit. And I still think, like you said, he's been, well above average, all things considered. Even though his shots and his scoring is down, but yeah, it would be nice. It's important for him to, maybe he'll find a way against, in Game 6, and I do think Dallas really needs to find him some 3-point shots. They need to make that a priority going into that game, but. Yeah, I don't think there's any concerns or anything to say, except that, when you look at the totality of what Kyrie Irving has done across the series, that he has been very good.
Yeah, and he will be called upon for sure in Game 6. So that gets us to this then. How do we feel like Game 6 is going to go, knowing all the information that we've seen through the first 5 games of this series, and now with the Mavericks having a second chance to close out a series in their own building?
I think... So I don't know if it's going to be, I mentioned, there's always the possibility, maybe it's just a shooting variance game. I think Oklahoma City is going to hit a few more shots. And I think Dallas may have to match that. Their defense is going to stay good. But there are some spots and space for Oklahoma City to exploit. And I do think that this will be, this might be a 15 or 16 made threes type game from them. Just by looking at how they haven't really popped up yet, and looking at how, they've had this long to get more comfortable, playing against the Dallas defense. And, that's kind of an oxymoron. The whole problem with this Dallas defense is that they don't make you comfortable. But I do think that, we're going to see a little bit more offense from Oklahoma City. And so what I'm going to say is that Dallas has to go and match that. It has to be Luka. It has to be the role players. It has to be, moments where Kyrie breaks free. To me, I think Game 6 will be about Luka making sure, whatever it takes, getting Dallas, to the next round. I think that's the key. That's what I'm watching for. That's what my guess at what the storyline's going to be. And he can do it. I absolutely believe he can do it. And so, we're going to see soon enough.
We are. And, interesting note about this game is that they had the extra day of rest, and what that could mean or not mean for Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving and others who are dealing with whatever ailments that they're dealing with. That extra day is certainly sure to play a factor in this. And, defensively, I expect to see the Mavericks play the same way, because I feel like at this point, Tim, these teams have made their adjustments, as many as that they could possibly make. I mean, Oklahoma City removed Josh Giddey out of the lineup, something that we thought we might see at the beginning of the series, and eventually happened. Jason Kidd even pushing the button of Jaden Hardy in game 5, and he gave him some good minutes, there. So I feel like these teams at this point, it's about, all right, who wants it more now? Because everybody feels like, even, Oklahoma City made that 2 big man, adjustment, having, Williams and Holmgren in together. That was effective a little bit in terms of offensive rebounding. But I feel like everyone's made their adjustments now. It's like, okay, who's going to go get it? Is it going to be SGA, Chet, or is it going to be Luka, Kyrie, and his boys going there to go get it? I feel like that's where we are now. And like you said, shot making is going to be big in game 6 to see who is able to knock down enough to be able to either force a game 7 if you're OKC, or if you're the Mavericks, getting back to the Western Conference Finals for the second time in 3 years, sandwiched in with a that whole lottery team thing. But we don't talk about that right now. That's in the past. That's all in the past. Tim, tell the folks where they can find you, what you got going on, man.
Same places as always. I'm on Twitter at The Athletic. Got my podcast, the Only Mavs podcast.
Yeah,
haven't been good getting episodes in this series, but we'll have something after Game 6 for sure. Maybe a preview.
How about that? Yeah. Well, look, you're working hard out here in these streets, man. You got a lot going on, so you doing what you can, traveling, all kinds of stuff. You doing what you can. So
I got some stories in the works I'm excited about. So hopefully at least 2 of them coming next week. So.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me here on the Inside the Mavs podcast, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thanks to Tim Cato of The Athletic for joining me here on the show. You can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.